Howdy my friends, and welcome to the channel today. I'm Luke, Thunderhead289 here on YouTube, and today I just got done installing a Carb Cheater 2.0 on my 64 Galaxy here, and she's running real good. So we're going to go through it here in a second, but we've released the 2.0 version of Carb Cheater. So I can immediately feel that I got to be more into the pedal to compensate for this stuff, and it's not bad, but it's not great. It's one of those things that's always bothered me about carbs. So now we're going to see that kick on and compensate and bring us right back to where we want to be, which is just a wicked cool thing to watch. That's like my favorite thing with Carb Cheater. What do you think, Mr. Frog? Now this spring I came to quite the crossroads with Carb Cheater, where we don't really run any margin on it, just enough to keep the thing in stock. And the purpose of doing Carb Cheater for me is I've made these tech videos for years, and I just wanted to provide something to you that made carburetor tuning fun, easy, and an enjoyable experience. And I think Carb Cheater really does a good job of doing that, and that's what the comments definitely support also. But to continue on with Carb Cheater, it was a hard decision. In supporting this, I've had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I've had one great guarantee through this whole thing, that I have destroyed my YouTube channel and my viewership, and just because I want to bring something to you that's actually decent. A lot of people sell you little trinkety things, hats and whatever, and you know, someday I'll be gone a few years and you won't even remember who I am, but maybe the teachings and things that you learned that Carb Cheater helped you do, you know, those are the things that last a lifetime. I'm here today, gone tomorrow. But, you know, stuff like Carb Cheater and the knowledge that maybe you'll gain will last forever. So I guess I'm okay with destroying myself for that purpose. But all that aside, the thing does a great job. You take a new carburetor and it's going to be bias rich. I want you to really understand that any new carburetor, they're always going to be bias rich, because they have to handle a myriad of scenarios, and this is where Carb Cheater comes in with its auto tune assist feature and does a great job. And not to mention, it's really easy to tune a carburetor when you have a full gauge pack right in front of your face at all times. And then if you don't want to look at it, you just unplug the thing and put it in your dash. Easy as that. To me, the wideband was super enlightening, but if you're going to spend a couple hundred, 250 for a good wideband, that's what you have to spend to get one that's actually good with a good sensor. You know, if you're going to do that, you might as well jump to, you know, in my mind, a Carb Cheater. You don't have to run wires through the dash. Super easy to install, and, you know, I don't know, you're dealing with me, and customer support and supporting you guys is, to me, the most important thing. So with that, my friends, hope you enjoyed the install on our 64 Galaxy, and do a little demo action on this thing, and let's hit the road. All right, I think our victim for the day is going to be the 64 Galaxy over here. Pretty much just because I need to take my wife and her friends somewhere in it in the very near future. So with that, let's see everything that comes in a Carb Cheater box. Now there's a full Carb Cheater, which we have here today, and also there's a Carb Cheater Lite, which if you follow me, you probably remember me installing that on this vehicle. But you know, we just can't keep them on the shelf, and some guy needed to go on some trip and really wanted one, so I pulled it off my own car to send to him. So, you know, we have a blank canvas here today once again. So this is everything that comes inside of your Carb Cheater box here. Everything you need to install a Carb Cheater is included. Now, other kits aren't like that. They'll leave out fuel system components and things. This is everything right here. So obviously your circuit board, vacuum lines, a real genuine Bosch O2 sensor, you know, good stuff. We spare no expense to do something right, so you have a a good experience here. Went a little fanatical with the packaging, but you know, is what it is. Now, some notable improvements is we allow Carb Cheater to flow a lot more air. So it has a broader range of dynamic adjustability. And also, we offer a display now where I'm sure you guys are used to seeing the app that comes with it here, but also now we have a display that fully replaces the app. Has a bunch of nifty little gauges. You can change the style on all of them, what they display. Just a ton of them in here. You can do all the settings for Carb Cheater on the display, so really good stuff. You even get a little 1980s display if that's what you fancy. But anyway, everything that you need to install a Carb Cheater on an engine is included, so let's get started. Now this install legitimately takes like only an hour and a half. It's super fast. So, you know, since we want to spend our time actually driving the vehicle and playing with Carb Cheater, I'm going to pull one of these numbers and we'll just move on. All right, so that took about an hour and a half. I probably could have done it a little bit quicker, but you know, I get kind of autistic about how I install stuff to make sure it looks good. Not like it matters in this thing, but it matters to me, so I took the time to do it. So let's go over a few install items so you don't make any mistakes and you understand how you're supposed to do it, but it's obviously really simple. And I spent a lot of time designing the circuitry so it would be easy. So pretty simple install here. If you did have a Carb Cheater light like I did already on this vehicle previously, we do have an upgrade kit to take you to a full Carb Cheater should you want to do that. But electrically, the install is pretty simple for light and the full version of Carb Cheater. So you have your yellow and green wire. They go to the coil. If you have an MSD, and this is in our install instructions, you need to follow that for MSD, and I'll show you an HEI installation here in a second because I have one right over there. But the biggest point about the electrical that I want to make, and we have it tagged now, is that I really want you to hook to the positive and negative of the battery with these two wires. The rest of it, you know, electrical connectors, they plug into their respective sensor, and I give you a ton of length for all of that, so that's easy. This is my ever faithful Maverick here that sports an HEI, and this has been my test vehicle for the last 70,000 miles of Carb Cheater. You can see I just kind of have it haphazardly laid over here, intentionally above the exhaust to see what it can handle. In our 2.0 version, boy, you can torch the ever-living snot out of the thing, and it just doesn't care. Not saying you should try to avoid heat, but it is much better about that at this point. So the other item here is your HEI. You have a bat and a tack. So bat is your yellow wire, tack is your green wire. If you already have wires on there, you can splice them in. Ideally, not as ugly as I did it here, but again, you know, test vehicle. I mean, there's a chain under the hood, so, you know, it is what it is. And I'm not kidding, for real, I've driven that car for 70,000 miles with a Carb Cheater to work and back and all over Power Tour. So, you know, Carb Cheater is obviously not going to do anything damaging to your engine. At least I've got 70,000 miles without a single issue, so take for that what you will. Now under the hood here, the Galaxy sports a factory 352 FE backed by a Ford Cruise-O-Matic transmission, has 130 or 30,000 original miles. The engine and the transmission have never been out of the vehicle. So it's all original, and to me it's kind of fun to try and keep it that way, except back in when I met my wife in college, she painted up that bad boy. So, you know, I was sentimental, so that ended up here. But over here is the Carb Cheater module and control valve. And so there's not a whole lot that goes on here as far as install difficulty. It only takes, for real, it only takes an hour to an hour and a half. And so there's your module board there. And then of course your control valve, your map sensor, those go to the supplied spacer that comes in your kit. And then there's a wideband O2 that installs down in the exhaust. It's super simple to install. There's only 4 wires you need to land, 2 to the battery and 2 to the coil, and then you're up and running. Now, I've primarily driven carbureted vehicles most of my life, which is mildly hilarious that I'm a programmer by day. But I've found that carburetors are extremely reliable, rock steady, over retrofit fuel injection stuff. And not that there's anything wrong with those kits, but to me, there's already a carburetor under the hood, especially this all original vehicle. You know, I just don't see any reason to do away with that. Carb Cheater makes all of the tuning and everything much more easy, and the best thing about Carb Cheater is that it gives an otherwise static metering device, which is the carburetor, which is in a dynamic environment, the ability to adapt to those environmental changes. Carb Cheater trims air-fuel ratio on the fly and takes advantage of some inherent carburetor items, and it's wicked cool. Taking a step back here in time to where my carb tuning journey all began some 18 years ago, I had this F100 and this 65 Galaxy back in high school and then through college, and unfortunately I moved a few times and they've sat around now. But like most folks who start out on their carb tuning journey, you know, you're playing educated guess. I spent a lot of time being frustrated. Then around 2012, 2013, I discovered the wideband O2. And then, you know, where I thought I was getting stuff tuned in pretty good, the wideband really helped me see what was going on. But it also revealed what I'd been fighting the entire time. And that was, I'd adjust the carburetor, everything would be great, and then the next day, I'd have to adjust it again. It was nuts. And it just went like that for years and years. And really that's because a carburetor, look at this little lawnmower carb on this supercharged 302. You know, I did actually start this up for the first time in 10 years this spring. But anyway, a carburetor is a static metering device in a dynamic environment. When you have underhood heat, stoplight, you're on the interstate, changes in temp, you know, 50 degrees outside, 70 degrees outside, all of these things, altitude, a carburetor cannot account for that. And that is what I was fighting the entire time. Look at all the cobwebs on this guy. Oh, I need to get back to working on this stuff. You can see the AM in there. And so the beauty of Carb Cheater is that it handles all of those anomalies, which is what we've always fought for years with carburetors, and basically brings a carburetor into the modern era. And let me roll clip on starting this guy. It was a pretty good time with that lawnmower carb. All right, here we go again. Now, a good wideband these days runs you a couple $100, and this one is not a good one. I won't tell you who bought this company out. You can look it up for yourself, but this is definitely one to avoid. Autometer is probably trustworthy, but you'll see some pretty, and Innovate and everything, you'll see some pretty hefty prices on those. And Carb Cheater, with all that it does, including a vacuum gauge built in and a tack and some other cool features like a shift light, it ain't a whole lot more expensive than just getting a wideband O2. Not to mention the auto tune features, which pretty neat. To start off with here, so Carb Cheater communicates with a phone app or a wireless display phone app completely wirelessly. You don't have any wires that go from the engine bay to the cab, and also the display or the app don't need to be connected for Carb Cheater to run and do its thing. But if you want a gauge display that you can look at, you can use the phone app or again the display, which I'll get to in a moment here. And I suppose I better show you that again here. So you download the Carb Cheater app from your normal app store, and then you click on it and it's going to just auto connect, and there it goes as soon as it opens. Now you can go into your settings and all that and such, but right now we are going to hit the road. So let me get back to the gauge that I like. There we go. And if you navigate away from the app and you come back to it again, it's going to auto connect and take you right to the gauge display. So at the moment, auto tune assist is off, so we are technically on our raw carburetor. All right, it's enough chit chat here. Let's get our old 352 FE fired up. FEs, man, they hardly make a full rotation. They fire up if they're tuned well. It just blows my mind for such a massive engine to do that, but I don't know. They really knew how to build stuff back in the 60s. That's what I know. All right, here we go. Camera picks it up a little bit here, shaded. You have all the gauges, so I guess you don't even need your speedometer technically. But we're doing about 55 or so. You know, we're in the mid 13s. It's pretty rich, but it accommodates everything and it seems to run well. You know, you would never know, but you're just leaving a lot of performance and efficiency, especially efficiency on the table, cruising around here at 13.5. And that's, again, you know, raw carburetor just trying to handle a myriad of scenarios. Isn't that right, Mr. Frog? And now we're coming up to a stop here, and when you get into the low range, everything gets really, really rich. And then as we would sit here and idle, it's going to very slowly over the course of, you know, you get stuck in traffic 10 minutes, it's going to slowly lean back out. But, you know, you come up here, remember we left home and we were at 13, and look at that. Now we're down around 11, 12. The idle on the vehicle actually is kind of rough. I can feel it through the pedal. But if I were to go lean this up, then at other times it would be too lean. And that's the thing that's always frustrated me about carburetors. It's like a world of compromises. And, you know, the factory does it too. You get a new Edelbrock or anything, they're going to shoot that middle range for the air-fuel ratio just because it gives it a lot of grace. It has to handle and accommodate all these things, but it's never going to be perfectly tuned for any one scenario because it just can't be. With Carb Cheater, well, ta-da, now it can be. Pretty exciting. So of course we went around the block and now we're idling at 12.5 instead of, you know, 11.5. It's just something else. So now we're going to turn our auto tune assist on and see what we have going down the road. We don't get T-boned here. And so it has a trim percentage. It's 0 to 100%, real simple. And it's going to work to keep that air-fuel ratio at our target that we set. What Carb Cheater is what folks have always, what they're after when they're buying these fuel injection setups and aftermarket kits, which if you read the reviews, they're plagued with a lot of issues, and a lot of folks don't realize the underlying costs with the fuel system, and then ultimately you have to have them tuned anyway, and then who wants to have their car tuned by someone else? You know, I always felt shame, I guess, with doing that. I never wanted to do that, and I'm sure you guys don't either. Not to mention, you know, if they fail, they have all these weird fancy parts that where are you gonna get them, and now you're stuck on the side of the road. A carburetor will always get you home. And this was extremely important to me for Carb Cheater design and development. Again, hard to do, but totally worth it in the end. I can understand the argument, well, now I got electronics under the hood. What happens if those fail? Is that going to leave me stranded? Well, if I can get in here, we got a pretty good connector. There we go. Notice the engine is still running. Now you lost your auto adapt feature, but you're still on your raw carburetor, and you're gonna get home and you're going to be more than likely just fine. I'd like to see you do that with fuel injection. We've been on the road for a minute now, so the underhood heat dropped, and now it's actually having to compensate more. So we're at about 50%. We're gonna turn it off. I could immediately feel it in my gas pedal. So we're down at low 12s or high 12s, low 13s. Staying in the 13s pretty good. So that's that safety factor I was talking about. So I can immediately feel that I got to be more into the pedal to compensate for this stuff. And it's just not, it's not bad, but it's not great. It's one of those things that's always bothered me about carbs. So now we're going to see that kick on and compensate and bring us right back to where we want to be, which is just a wicked cool thing to watch. That's like my favorite thing with Carb Cheater. What do you think, Mr. Frog? And to me, that's just the coolest stuff. That's automotive anarchy. You just don't see a carburetor, the air-fuel ratio, trimming on the fly. Pretty nifty. And a lot of folks will say, well, they tried to do that in the 80s. I want you to think what a computer was in the 80s, okay, versus what we have today. Obviously, we have some pretty good technology that they didn't have then. It was a good concept then, but they couldn't execute on it. Now with Carb Cheater, we can effectively execute on that concept. You retain the rock solid reliability of a carburetor. You can do it all yourself. You know, you're not paying someone else to do it. Now it's a fair argument to say I don't want it at 14.5 or 14.7 all the time. When I step on the throttle, I want the enrichment circuit to come in. I want to be at 12.5 or so. You know, if you understand air-fuel ratio, that's not a wild concept. And so anyway, our vacuum threshold setting here, when we get below that, and I'm gonna have to slowly roll into it so our phone doesn't fall down. When we get below 8 here, Carb Cheater adjustment is gonna go to 0. Then we're gonna get to our power valve. There's our power valve and our enrichment circuit coming in. Now, I've been a carb tuner for a long time. I was a mechanic before I was an engineer, and then I was an engineer before I became a programmer, which gave me the ability to overall make this thing. But because I have the background knowledge, I put everything in there you need to blend really well with your carbureted engine. It's extremely universal. I painstakingly, to much great suffering, to make it so it was nice and universal. Much more difficult to do that, but ultimately, man, it's just, you can take it, you can put it on a car, you can take it and throw it on a classic tractor if you want to. I don't care. V8, 4-cylinder, it doesn't matter. It's just that last little bit the carburetors have always needed. Doing a little bit of gravel travel here, which kind of hurts me in this car. But the one criticism you'll see about Carb Cheater, and it's online, and it's 100% from people who have never owned one, they'll say, just learn how to tune a carburetor. You know, you can see from all this stuff that, again, it's a static metering device in a dynamic environment. It can run pretty well, but it's never for any specific scenario going to be optimized because it has to handle such a broad range. Carb Cheater, again, gives it that last little bit, that dynamic control, where it can be optimized for a much broader range of scenarios, and it does a great job at it. So again, you know, carburetor, it's a static metering device in a dynamic environment, but when we turn that little switch on, all of a sudden, it's a dynamic metering device in a dynamic environment, which is pretty cool. Almost as cool as staying in my lane on the road, giving Mr. Frog a heart attack. Now, the one argument I get about Carb Cheater that I can level with is folks do not like using their phone for Carb Cheater. For a couple years now, they've asked me for a dedicated display for a Carb Cheater setup, and so that's what we have here finally and it comes with I really tried too hard, comes with a whole bunch of different gauges here you can turn on, if I can remember where they're at. So there we go, you know, let's just turn a few of them on here. All right, and we're gonna go to exit. So there's your 1980s display, kind of a nifty display. There's different ways to style them there, different things. That's the one I like using. Again, you can style what gauge is on the side and all this other tomfoolery. Just a lot of neat stuff. You can do all your Carb Cheater settings just like your phone app down there from the display. And again, it's entirely wireless. This is just a power cord, and it has a GPS module so you can get a speed reading. But I like that. It doesn't need a phone. And again, for Carb Cheater to be running, this doesn't have to be powered, that doesn't have to be powered. It's all the brains are under the hood. And just to show you what it looks like when a screen is hooked up the proper way, aside from all the other improper things going on here. So you just start the vehicle, it comes on, and it will auto connect. And there you go. 16.6 is a cal number. That's showing me that everything's checking out good. So then it comes alive. And there you have it. And a lot of people do ask me about the display. It absolutely is wireless. Obviously you have to power it. I don't believe in lithium batteries that explode in your car. But as far as is the display 100% wireless, yes it is. Which is important to me because I hate running wires from there into there, especially on a classic vehicle where you got to drill holes in the firewall. Let's see how far away I can get. I'm pretty sure the range is not half bad. All right, this is getting a little ridiculous. Okay, I didn't even intend to make the range this strong. Are we just gonna, how far away can we go? Okay, well, anyway, suffice it to say, oh, there we go, finally. And they're reconnected, so kind of neat. Now the big question with Carb Cheater is how does it do what it does? Now functionally it's conceptually pretty simple, but mechanically and programmatically it's fairly difficult, but Carb Cheater does a great job here. So you saw our 1-inch spacer that we installed. This is basically the same thing, just a 1/2-inch variant. And so you see here it's got these centralized ports, and basically Carb Cheater offsets that rich condition by letting in more or less air dynamically on the fly. Now what's nice about this configuration is it homogenizes extremely well with that incoming air fuel charge through the boosters or the idle circuit. It just does a really good job. So that's an important piece to make it work. You can kind of see it better on this 2 to 4 barrel adapter, which is pretty slick. Now Carb Cheater gets referred to online as a vacuum leak. To me that has negative connotations. A vacuum leak is generally on one cylinder. It's never going to be a centralized scenario. And if Carb Cheater is a vacuum leak, I guess we should just start calling a PCV valve a vacuum leak because it operates the exact same way. But a PCV valve is static and Carb Cheater is dynamic. Now Carb Cheater wasn't designed with the intent to be a fuel economy device. If you have a classic car, I don't know why you care about fuel economy, you know. You probably have a primary car. If you have 2 cars, you know, anyway, conceptually weird. But I will say, it was fairly serendipitous that it does seem to actually improve fuel economy. Now, you'll notice that as the Carb Cheater valve itself opens, you'll start to lift up on the throttle and the percentage will kind of chase that. And it does this weird thing where those ports on the spacer, you know, that starts to very much so highly atomize the fuel charge that's coming through the carb and seems to have quite an interesting fuel economy effect. I'm not going to make any claims about that because that is not my intent for designing Carb Cheater, and I do not care about fuel economy. But it's kind of a weird thing that a lot of people have reported. Personally, I think that if you just dial in your carb fairly decent and then let Carb Cheater handle that day-to-day stuff, keeping a good clean air fuel ratio, your fuel economy will go up anyway. But, you know, there is something kind of weird that goes on there, and I'm not sure. But I don't know. Seems like a positive to me. So final thoughts here, if you have any questions or comments or have things with Carb Cheater I didn't address, because I don't know, you know, I could make a professional video or whatever, but I'm just not a very good salesman because I don't care about that stuff. I like doing wacky and weird stuff like the lawnmower carb and cobbled together V8 distributor on this Jeep 4-cylinder, much more than marketing things. I'm not used to seeing dynamic gyroscopic carburetors, but I guess today there's a new day for everything that's first, something like that. And really the point of Carb Cheater is just so all of you guys can get the opportunity like I have to get into this stuff and just have a much more enjoyable experience. So with that, my friends, thanks for coming along with me today, and I appreciate all the support for the years, and it's super stressful and very weird that there's several thousand carb cheaters out there in the world right now. So 2.0 is hit the website, have at it, I suppose. Catch you guys for the next one.